Welcome to Epic World History. Today we journey into the storm of the 3rd century, the Gothic Wars. From the Danube frontier, once Rome's proud shield, came waves of Germanic invasion that shattered cities, burned villages, and tested emperors. We will follow the rise of kings and Caesars, battles of iron and fire, and the resilience of soldiers and civilians caught in chaos. The mid-3rd century marked a dark turning point in Roman military history. Across the Danube frontier, the Gothic Wars erupted as Germanic invasions swept into imperial lands. With Rome weakened by civil wars and plague, the Goths saw opportunity. Their longships crossed rivers, their warriors marched through provinces, and the empire's defenses were tested as never before. The Danube frontier had long been Rome's shield against northern tribes. But during the Gothic Wars, that line cracked. Settlements along the river fell, Roman garrisons collapsed, and Germanic invasion spread like wildfire. The empire, already in crisis, now faced enemies who pressed deep into its Balkan provinces. The fate of cities and people hung in the balance. The Gothic Wars began under Emperor Decius in 249 AD. Determined to defend Roman military history with valor, Decius marched north. Yet the Goths, led by King Cniva, moved swiftly across the Danube frontier, capturing cities and cutting supply lines. Roman armies fought hard, but unfamiliar terrain and fierce resistance threatened to unravel their strength. Visual reference: Decius addressing his soldiers, Gothic raiders burning a town. In 251 AD, the Battle of Abrittus became a defining tragedy of the Gothic Wars. The Roman army, lured into marshland, was encircled. Emperor Decius and his son were slain, the first time a Roman ruler had died in battle against barbarians. Germanic invasion had broken imperial pride, and the empire's vulnerability stood exposed to the world. After Abrittus, Rome's borders shook. The Gothic Wars intensified, and Germanic invasion spread deeper across the Danube frontier. Towns like Philippopolis were besieged, their walls battered by Gothic engines. Survivors told tales of slaughter, enslavement, and fire. Roman military history entered one of its darkest chapters, where the empire's strength seemed powerless before the relentless tide of northern tribes. The Danube frontier no longer held firm. Roman generals scrambled to rebuild defenses while villages fell one by one. The Gothic Wars blurred the line between invaders and settlers, as some tribes raided while others stayed behind, carving new homes in Roman soil. Germanic invasion was no longer just a threat. It became a slow transformation of imperial lands. Emperor Gallienus rose during this storm. In Roman military history, he is remembered as both reformer and survivor. Facing the Gothic wars, Gallienus reorganized cavalry units to respond quickly across the Danube frontier. Yet, while victories came, the sheer scale of Germanic invasion meant no triumph lasted long. Each season brought new raiders, new fires, and new scars. The Gothic wars also spread to the sea. Using captured ships, Goth raiders stormed across the Black Sea, striking Roman coastal towns. Treasures of temples, homes, and markets fell into foreign hands. Germanic invasion now reached where Roman legions could not sail fast enough to defend. For the empire, the Danube frontier was no longer a line. It was collapsing. Roman military history during the 3rd century crisis became a chronicle of desperate defense. The Gothic wars forced emperors to fight on multiple fronts. Persia in the east, usurpers within, and Germanic invasion across the Danube. The legions, once Rome's unshakable shield, were spread thin. In every province, cities built higher walls, knowing the barbarians might return tomorrow. By the 260s, the Gothic wars reached new heights of destruction. Germanic invasion poured across the Danube frontier, sacking Thessalonica and threatening Greece itself. Panic spread in Roman military history, for never before had these provinces felt the weight of barbarian armies. Athens, once cradle of learning, prepared its walls against tribes who had crossed from forests into classical lands. The Danube frontier, once a proud border of stone, became a scar. The Gothic wars showed that fortresses alone could not hold waves of Germanic invasion. Roman towns begged for aid, but the empire, torn by rival emperors, had little to give. Every new leader promised victory, but civil war consumed legions that might have held the Goths at bay. The Gothic wars were not fought by armies alone. Civilians suffered most. Villages burned, families enslaved, and fields abandoned to weeds. Germanic invasion across the Danube frontier was not just a military crisis, it was a social catastrophe. Roman military history in this era records famine, plague, and despair spreading alongside the march of barbarian armies. Emperor Valerian sought to restore Roman might, but he was captured by the Persians in the east. With him gone, Gallienus bore the burden of the Gothic wars alone. Germanic invasion intensified across the Danube frontier, testing every reform he made. Roman military history now balanced between survival and collapse, as the empire itself seemed to fracture under pressure. The Danube frontier became a graveyard of legions. Units stationed along the river melted away, struck by both Gothic swords and Roman neglect. The Gothic wars revealed an empire overstretched, unable to guard every road and bridge. Germanic invasion pierced through like water through cracks, spreading across valleys, mountains, and coasts. Rome was learning the cost of empire's vastness. By 268 AD, a new emperor, Claudius II, rose to power. Known in Roman military history as Claudius Gothicus, he vowed to turn the tide of the Gothic wars. The Danube frontier groaned under endless Germanic invasion, but Claudius gathered what strength remained. For the first time in years, Rome prepared not for survival, but for victory. At the Battle of Abrittus in 269, Claudius met the Goths in a clash that defined the Gothic Wars. Roman legions, hardened by years of retreat, fought with desperate ferocity. The Germanic invasion shattered under disciplined counterattacks. Tens of thousands of Goths fell, and Claudius earned his name Gothicus. Roman military history recorded this as a rare triumph in dark times. The victory at Naissus lifted spirits, but the Gothic wars were not over. Germanic invasion still flowed across the Danube frontier, though weaker. Rome, for the moment, had proved its resilience. Claudius Gothicus became a symbol of defiance, but even as he triumphed, plague struck his army. Roman military history reminds us, victories often came at terrible cost. Claudius II died in 270, leaving the Gothic Wars unfinished. His successor, Aurelian, inherited both the crown and the Danube frontier in crisis. Germanic invasion persisted, and the empire still reeled from division. Yet Aurelian was a man of iron will. Roman military history would soon remember him as the emperor who restored boundaries with relentless discipline. The Danube frontier under Aurelian became a fortress of will. Though the Gothic wars continued, he forced tribes back across the river with relentless campaigns. Germanic invasion weakened, though it never fully ceased. Roman military history notes this period as one of restoration, when discipline returned and the empire, for a time, held back the tide of northern tribes. The Gothic Wars revealed Rome's new reality. The Germanic invasion across the Danube frontier was no longer a rare event, but a recurring storm. The empire survived, but it had changed. Roman military history shows that these conflicts weakened provinces, reshaped borders, and foreshadowed centuries of struggle that would one day bring Rome itself to its knees. For the Goths, the wars brought both loss and gain. Their dead lay across battlefields, yet their name now echoed across Roman lands. Germanic invasion had written them into history. The Danube frontier was no longer a boundary, but a meeting ground of cultures forged in blood. The Gothic wars proved that barbarians were no longer shadows, they were rising powers. The Gothic wars scarred the Balkans deeply. Cities once thriving became ruins. Roads that had carried legions for centuries turned into paths for raiders. Germanic invasion left behind ashes, but also settlements where Goths remained. Roman military history of this time reads as a tale of resilience, of a world trying to survive while its foundations cracked beneath. Roman military history calls this the crisis of the 3rd century, and the Gothic wars stood at its heart. The Germanic invasion across the Danube frontier revealed cracks in empire's armor. Though Rome endured, its aura of invincibility dimmed. The Gothic wars were a warning, a signal that even the eternal city could bleed when struck again and again. The Gothic wars ended not with treaties, but with exhaustion. Both Rome and the Goths paid a terrible price. Germanic invasion slowed, but it would return in centuries to come. The Danube frontier, once Rome's pride, had become a permanent battlefield. In its soil lay the bones of Romans and Goths alike, witnesses to a struggle without final victory. The Gothic Wars, fought between 249 and 270 AD, reshaped Rome forever. Germanic invasion across the Danube frontier exposed the empire's fragility and began a story that would echo for centuries. Roman military history records not only defeat and despair, but resilience and reform. From these wars came lessons of power and survival, reminders that even empires must bend or break.